431,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, concentrated at a single tooth tip, enough to pierce solid bone the way a nail gun drives through pine. We picture it as a slow, lumbering giant, a brute that simply crushed whatever stood in front of it, driven by hunger and nothing else. But the fossil record reveals a different animal, a fast-growing, specialized predator with vision wider than a modern hawk and evidence of a complex social life. How did a predator this heavy balance such immense weight with rapid turning agility? And what was actually happening inside the mind of the animal that sat at the top of its world? Its entire reign was confined to a single subtropical island continent, never a global conqueror. This is the story of what it actually was, and what that isolation made it become. 68 million years ago, a vast, isolated ecosystem stretches across western North America. This is Laramidia. During the Maastrichtian Age, shallow inland seas cut this landmass off from the rest of the world. Hot, humid, dense with forest pressing in from every direction. And it is the only place on Earth where the apex predator exists. Tyrannosaurus rex evolved within a strict geographical boundary. The constraints of this environment forced the species into severe specialization. The ecosystem demands so much from each individual that it can sustain only a few. They are scattered wide across the continent. One adult commands an average territory of 109 square kilometers, 42 square miles of forest, floodplain, and swamp held by a single animal. At any given moment, an estimated 20,000 adults walk the earth. But this stable kingdom endures for deep geological time. Over a span of 2.4 million years, an estimated 2.5 billion individuals live and die. They dominate the coastal swamps, unbroken by any outside competition, generation after generation after generation. A lineage defined not by territorial expansion, but by absolute mastery of one dense, constrained corner of the world. Until the Cretaceous period is violently brought to a close, the landmass burns, the long prehistoric range shatters forever. Their bones are buried deep in the ash and sediment of Laramidia. They are left frozen in stone. Today we pull those heavy skeletons from the rock of western North America. They cast a colossal shadow, but an adult skeleton is just the final, finished product. Before it ever ruled the continent, a tyrant first had to grow. How did a delicate chick survive an ecosystem designed to kill it, and frantically metamorphose into a giant? They begin as prey. A hatchling emerges no larger than a wild turkey, insulated in down. The dark forest floor is an unforgiving, deadly nursery. 60% will not survive their first year. Starvation, spreading disease, and larger predators exact a toll without mercy. But the few survivors adapt. Their bodies stretch out. These growing juveniles occupy a distinct ecological space. They are built for sustained running, chasing down fast, agile prey. Their jaws hold thin, blade-like teeth meant for slicing. They appear so unrecognizable that researchers once misclassified these running teenagers as a separate dwarf species called Nanotyrannus. Microscopic bone rings reveal the true story. A frantic, internal metabolic overdrive. Between ages 14 and 18, a physical transformation begins, and it does not stop. It adds 4.6 pounds every single day. The skull morphs from narrow slicer into a boxy vault. Fueling this shift demands thousands of calories. Constant hunting. Their biological engines burn hot, but briefly. The famous fossil specimen known as Sue lived to 28 years old. Trix reached 30, her tail vertebrae fused by arthritis. 3 decades stands as the hard ceiling for them. By its early 20s, the long-legged teenager has finally vanished. What remains is a staggering, multi-ton apex predator. The metamorphosis is complete. Hatchling prey transformed, through attrition and overdrive, into something the world had never seen. The cost of that size was written in bone rings and broken bodies. The reward was dominance. To dominate the island continent, evolution pushed the theropod body plan to its utmost structural limit. The maximum size threshold for this predator is etched into a specimen named Scotty. This giant stretched 13 meters in length, supporting an estimated 8,870 kilograms of mass. Fueling that enormous physical bulk required a relentless metabolism. This animal maintained an elevated body temperature, burning hot, around the clock. Externally, the gigantic adult body was insulated not by downy feathers, but by tough, separate, pebbly scales, each one small as a coin. Thick, scaly lips sealed its jaws shut, keeping the delicate tooth enamel fully hydrated. Beneath the skin, its internal anatomy was heavily braced. A dense basket of gastralia safely cradled the organs. Even its extremely short arms were deceptively powerful. Thick cortical bone allowed each limb to lift 400 pounds. Moving such immense weight created a fatal vulnerability. If a sprinting adult tripped, it meant certain death. The violent impact of its torso striking the ground would generate 6 Gs of force, rupturing vital organs. To survive, it was restricted to a maximum speed of 20 kilometers per hour. Its long, robust legs utilized an interlocking foot structure. A pinched middle toe bone acted as a shock absorber, and crucial weight savings were engineered into the skeleton. The enormous skull was heavily pneumatized. Intricate networks of trapped air sacs reduced overall mass without sacrificing structural integrity. Solid, fused, nasal bones safely absorbed extreme compression from bites. This was structural engineering refined across millions of years. A chassis built not merely to survive its own weight, but to weaponize it. Every hollow chamber, every fused strut, every reinforced joint converged on a single solution: maximum force, minimum cost. Look closely at the skull of Tyrannosaurus rex. The eyes face forward. This is the stare of a predator. Those eyes overlap to create a binocular field of 55 degrees, granting a sweeping three-dimensional view. The acuity behind those eyes was unlike anything alive today, up to 13 times sharper than our own. This animal could spot a meal clearly up to 6 kilometers away. But sight was only one tool. Casts of the brain case reveal immense olfactory lobes. They rivaled the whole cerebrum. Lobes that size place the tyrant's sense of smell alongside the most acute vultures alive today. It could track a decaying carcass across enormous distances. Deeper inside the skull, the ear told its own story. The cochlea is elongated to capture low-frequency sound waves. It felt the deep, rumbling footsteps of distant herds. Those infrasonic vibrations cut straight through the dense coastal forests. Well-developed semicircular canals gave it a stable read of its own body moving through space, a predator that maintained constant awareness of its posture. The sensory network extended all the way out to the tip of its snout. Deep canals housed nerves that made the heavy jaws alive to the faintest pressure. A touch as light as a feather registered with striking clarity. This formidable facial weapon was gentle enough to build a nest or delicately nuzzle a mate. Sight, smell, sound, touch, each sense a finely tuned instrument, not the crude apparatus of a simple brute. Together they painted a portrait of the world around it in extraordinary detail, every acute sense locked firmly onto the living target. But how does a 9-ton giant launch an ambush? This heavy biped was never designed for distance. It depended strictly on the sudden strike. Its most efficient walking pace was a slow prowl, just under 5 kilometers an hour. Sustained running was out of the question. Pushing into a dead sprint would cause its leg bones to shatter. Instead of straight line speed, it relied on close quarters agility. By planting one single foot, enormous pelvic muscles could violently whip its colossal body around in a tight circle. The heavy tail actively swung side to side, throwing weight into turns. With disproportionately small arms, the initial strike depended solely on the heavy skull. The mouth had to do all the work. The jaws slammed shut with 57,000 newtons of force, the strongest terrestrial bite ever. Its 30-centimeter teeth drove that immense force downward, piercing armor and bone alike. To prevent cracking, deep folds called ampullae distributed the catastrophic impact stress throughout the serrated tooth. Unable to chew, it used a brutal puncture and pull strategy to dismember prey. The reinforced snout safely deflected the structural shock away from the fragile brain case. An expanding lower jaw let it swallow large chunks whole. This immense predator easily swallowed up to 230 kilograms of meat and skeleton in one mouthful. 44-centimeter droppings are half composed of pulverized bone, and we know this predator actively hunted living, dangerous targets. One surviving Edmontosaurus tail vertebrae contains a buried Tyrannosaurus tooth, sealed forever within healed, living bone. The evidence is written in the bones of its prey. Deep inside the thick skull, the brain did not fill the bone. It floated, suspended in fluid, cradled by the very architecture meant to protect it. Shaped like a long tube, it was cushioned by cerebrospinal fluid and thick blood vessels, a living shock absorber at the core of a killing machine. Toward the back of that tube, the floccular lobes were enlarged out of proportion. They kept its eyes locked, fixed with unyielding focus on prey that had already begun to run. The question of how much was happening behind those locked eyes has divided science. One study argued the telencephalon held 3 billion neurons, a figure that would place it alongside primates, capable of tool use and abstract reasoning. A rebuttal followed with a far more conservative estimate, 360 million neurons. That density scales closely with modern crocodiles. These living relatives do not build tools, but they are nothing close to mindless. Crocodiles coordinate hunts, they play, they defend territory with fierce, unrelenting purpose, and the fossil record shows that tyrannosaurs did too. Mass bone beds from western North America suggest tyrannosaurs moved together, different ages traveling through the same forests at the same time. But that social world was not gentle. More than half of all discovered adult skulls bear healed bite marks. The spacing matches tyrannosaur teeth. They bit each other directly across the face. Fierce, non-fatal combat waged for territory, for mates, for rank within the hierarchy. Wounds healed, animals survived, and they returned to fight again, bearing the scars that tell us, in bone, just how complex this social order truly was. The lower jawbones of the famous specimen Sioux feature smooth, eroded holes. These are the undeniable scars of trichomoniasis. This severe parasitic infection still afflicts modern birds today. It swelled the throat. The apex predator of Laramidia was eventually brought down by a microscopic parasite. She starved. This complex animal ruled its environment. So how did it suddenly fall? 66 million years ago, an asteroid struck the Yucatan Peninsula, and the biosphere unraveled in hours. The ecosystems fell, the dinosaurs fell, but the fossils they left behind point to something stranger than simple extinction. The physical evidence points to a creature capable of strategy, memory, and social depth. This ecosystem was not a gallery of instinct-driven machines. It was an active, thinking world. We are just beginning to decode the biology frozen in stone. Subscribe now. Every week we crack open another chapter of the deep past. The deeper question is not what was lost, it is how many other ways of experiencing the world are still out there, waiting in rock we have not yet split open.